Do you think that the Israelis have a point when they say that Trump is thinking out of the box? This is what Netanyahu says, and that is constructive because there are no other viable solutions for what to do about Gaza. And when it comes to the Palestinians, attempts to accommodate them, attempts to find some kind of compromise have always failed, going back to 1948.
You're asking me, is there a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that's been there and we've just missed? The answer is no. There was no way you were going to solve this one because the Israelis from the beginning have wanted all of Greater Israel. They were never interested in giving the Palestinians a state of their own.
Come on!
Freddie Gray entered this conversation confident, armed with his usual talking points, believing he has the upper cut here, until you'll see Professor John is going to hit him with a reality check so sharp it cut through steel that is now being tariffed by President Trump in the United States. You can see it on Freddie's face. Every polished argument he prepares is going to fall apart in real time. The myth of generous Israel obliterated. Trump's so-called out-of-the-box genius dismantled. And the best part, Freddie is struggling to keep up. You'll see. He is completely out of his depth here against the intellectual firepower of Professor John Mearsheimer. Let's jump into it.
This is a myth that we purvey in the West so that we can support Israel fully. So it's not like I think there is a solution out there, a viable solution. The best that the Israelis were able to come up with was where they basically locked the Palestinians in Gaza in a giant open air prison, and they thought they could manage that problem. And that looked like it worked up until October 7th. And now the question is, what do you do moving forward? And the Israelis would like to cleanse Gaza. That's been their policy goal since October 7th, to cleanse Gaza. They want to get rid of all the Palestinians. And the question is, do you think this is a viable or an ethical solution? I don't think it's a viable solution because I don't think the Palestinians are going to leave. You want to remember that the Israelis have just spent the past 16 months executing what I call a genocide in Gaza. They have murdered huge numbers of Palestinians. By almost all accounts, they've made the place unlivable. It's really quite remarkable when you see the destruction that they have wrought in Gaza. And nevertheless, the Palestinians are still there, and Hamas, by Israeli accounts and by Tony Blinken's account, is alive and well. So what are we going to do now to fix the problem? What's the viable solution that Trump has? What does this thinking outside of the box add up to? There's no question he's thinking outside of the box, but is what he is thinking logical? Is it viable? Is it morally correct? I don't think it's any of those things. I, as an American, certainly don't want to be associated with a policy that calls for ethnically cleansing Gaza at the end of a rifle barrel. Furthermore, I don't think you can do it. The Israelis were unable to do it. I don't think we're going to be able to do it. Trump has made it clear we're not going to go in there and do it. So who's going to do it? The Israelis? Well, they've already tried. What do you think they've been doing for the past 15 months? This is like, people say, if the hostages don't come back on Saturday, these are the Israeli hostages who are due to be released this Saturday. If they don't come back, Netanyahu is going to restart the war. And I say to myself, okay, what does that mean? The war was not going very well, which is why the Israelis agreed to the ceasefire. They didn't agree to the ceasefire because Trump put great pressure on them. They agreed to the ceasefire in large part because the IDF, the Israeli military, put great pressure on Netanyahu to effect a ceasefire because the IDF understood it could not defeat Hamas, number one, and number two, the Israeli army was coming apart at the seams. It was suffering great casualties in Gaza, and furthermore, that this is an army that's configured for fighting short wars, not long wars. It was not configured to fight a war of attrition over a long period of time in Gaza. So it was in deep trouble. So the Israelis agreed to a ceasefire. And now we're talking about putting an end to that ceasefire. Okay, what's the magic formula that the Israelis have now come up with that's going to allow them to deal with the Hamas problem that they couldn't deal with for the first 16 months of the war? I just don't understand. So, Trump is thinking outside the box, but sometimes thinking outside the box makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, I don't think it makes sense.
I want to go back a little bit to where you said that the Israelis have always wanted a greater Israel. Isn't that a pretty controversial thing to say, and perhaps unfair, given that there may be politicians in Israel today who wanted greater Israel and have done for a long time, but Israel as a state has not always acted as though it has wanted a greater Israel. It has sought accommodation with the Palestinians, and it has been rebuffed.
No, I don't believe that. I believe these are myths that we tell ourselves in the West so that we can continue to support Israel down the line. I think the original Zionists, the people who were interested in creating a Jewish state, which of course happened in May of 1948, understood full well that they could not take all the territory at once, simply because there were so many Palestinians in the area and not nearly as many Jews, and it would have to be done incrementally. But the idea that the Israelis were interested in a meaningful two-state solution, and it was the Palestinians who rejected those wholly generous offers by the Israelis, is a tall tale. And I know we tell it in the West, and when I make the argument that I'm making, people think that, I'm an anti-Semite or I'm hostile to Israel and so forth and so on. But there's a whole literature written by Israelis that makes it clear that the Israelis were never interested in creating a Palestinian state, and they wanted all of Israel. They just understood that they'd have to do it gradually. They wouldn't be able to take all that territory all at once.
Yeah, well, I would never accuse you of anti-Semitism, although I know a lot of people do. But let's get back to Trump rather than getting into a discussion of Middle Eastern politics, because what a lot of people are speculating, and this certainly looks like it might be playing out now, is that what Trump was trying to do was pressure the neighboring Arab states to come up with viable solutions of their own, possibly rebuilding Gaza themselves, paying for it, and possibly trying to look after some of the Palestinian people who have been displaced. Jordan seems to be rebuffing Trump a bit more forcefully at the moment, whereas Egypt has suggested that it would like to come up with a reconstruction plan for Gaza. So perhaps this is bluster from Trump that is working, that's achieving leverage over those Arab states.
I don't believe that at all. It's actually united the Arab states in the region. There's universal agreement among the Arab states and universal agreement in the Arab and Islamic world that this is morally reprehensible, that this is the Palestinians' land, that the United States and Israel have absolutely no right to push them out. And in no way are they going to accommodate the United States and Israel. We're isolated on this one. I'm sure the Europeans are with us on this for the most part. But outside of the Europeans, there's no support for what the United States wants to do in this case. The last thing Jordan wants is to create a huge enclave for more Palestinians inside its borders. And Egypt is thinking the same way. Look, the fact is the United States is remarkably powerful. And it has tremendous leverage over Egypt and Jordan, because in the past, we worked out a deal with Egypt and Jordan where we would give them huge amounts of financial aid if they played nice with Israel. We bought off for Israel. We did this for Israel. We bought off Jordan and Egypt. Again, there's a huge literature on this. This is not something I'm making up. But once we do that, not only do we guarantee at the time that Egypt and Jordan will play nice with Israel, but it gives us huge leverage over time. And Trump fully understands that. And he's basically telling the Jordanians and the Egyptians, we have huge economic leverage over you. And we're going to use that leverage to force you, we're going to coerce you into accepting the Palestinians. And the question you have to ask yourself is whether or not the Jordanians and the Egyptians will cave. And the Jordanians made it clear yesterday. The Jordanian president made it clear in a tweet after his meeting with Trump that that's not going to happen. And Sisi, General Sisi, the Egyptian leader, canceled his trip to Washington because he doesn't want to be humiliated by Trump. And he wants to make it clear that he's not going to go along either. So you have a situation here, Freddie. The Palestinians are not going to leave. The Egyptians are not going to take them. The Jordanians are not going to take them. And then you have to ask yourself a simple question. Where does that leave us?
Well, I would say, I'd go back to that point that the Egyptians are saying that they're going to propose a redevelopment plan for Gaza. And to some extent, Trump's move has exposed a certain hypocrisy among the Arab states, which is that there is an astronomical bill to fix Gaza, which neighboring states are not willing to pay. And yet they are willing to condemn Israel, to condemn the United States. They're not willing to take part in any solutions. Trump is pushing them into coming up with solutions.
Freddie, why should the neighboring states pay for what Israel and the United States did in Gaza?
Because as a realist, you should accept that it's in their regional interest.
It's not in their regional interest at all.
Why not?
The United States and Israel destroyed Gaza. The Israelis were executing a genocide. Trump sits there with Netanyahu and they talk about Gaza now being unlivable. And they talk about all the destruction in Gaza and the fact that the Palestinians cannot live there. It has been so thoroughly wrecked. And then the question is, who wrecked Gaza? Who did this? And the answer is the Israelis, Benjamin Netanyahu sitting right next to Trump. And Netanyahu did it in cahoots with Joe Biden and the West, and especially the United States. We should pay for rebuilding Gaza. The Israelis should pay for rebuilding Gaza. It's the Israelis and the Americans who destroyed Gaza, not the Egyptians or the Jordanians.
Come on!
In the end, Professor John Mearsheimer joined this debate not to cuddle anyone with the same old sugar-coated stories about the benevolent Israel. Instead, he's here to expose the glaring double standards that let Western myths obscure the harsh truths, chief among them that the so-called two-state solution was never a genuine possibility, but rather a smokescreen for the gradual annexation of Greater Israel. Professor John's arguments are a powerful call for honesty, unflinchingly revealing how Israel's aggression policies, coupled with the West's complicity, have turned Gaza into a perpetual war zone. Then there's Freddy, clinging desperately to these tired, self-serving myths, as if his ideological comfort depends on it. Deep down, Freddy can't seem to accept that the facts might upend his carefully constructed narrative. Professor John's unwavering demand for accountability doesn't just dismantle illusion, it lays bare the hypocrisy at the heart of Israel's actions. While Freddy flounders, trying to defend his outdated talking points, Professor John's razor-sharp logic and biting wit serves as a reminder reality isn't negotiable, and double standards are a punchline we've long stopped laughing at. Let me know in the comments if you think Professor John is wrong, or why Freddy is having a hard time coping with the facts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope to catch you all on the next one.